Ranger, Mage, Summoner, Melee. These are the 4 classes currently in Terraria, and ever since the game's inception, people have wondered which class is truly the best. It has ebbed and flowed over time, with Summoner not even existing or arguably even being finished until the most recent update. But now, I want to finally determine once and for all which class is truly the best in Terraria 1.4.5. To do this, we can't simply see which class can do the most damage. That wouldn't be looking at the full picture. So instead, I have separated my grading criteria into 4 categories, and whichever class does the most damage against the boss or kills them the fastest within that category will earn 3 points, second 2, third 1, and last place 0. But of course, since the fastest kill is not always the objective, an extra point can be earned by the class or classes that suffer the fewest defeats. Here are the categories. First is the theoretical max. This category assumes the player has infinite time, skill, and knowledge to obtain the most powerful gear theoretically possible at any stage of the game. The second category is the wiki recommendations. Using what the wiki says is best, which class is the most powerful. The third category is the most objective one, which I have dubbed the path of least resistance, which is a mixed category of what a new player or a veteran who doesn't feel like farming would obtain. The general idea being to find the minimal and easiest gear required to make the class viable. Finally is the survey category, which compiles the results from a survey I sent out to the community, and their votes will determine the loadout. With that, let's go to our first boss and see these categories in action, where any confusion you may still have will hopefully be cleared up. But actually, before that, I want to preface really quick, ultimately, a lot of this came to choices and subjectivity, and it's not a hard and fast rule. Whatever class you like the most, that's the best class. Whatever one works best for you, that's the best class. But to feed the class wars, we're going to be doing this and determining a ultimate #1 top spot class with my methodology, and whatever happens, happens. If there's mistakes, so be it. Maybe I'll dub a new winner if there's enough of them found in the comments section. But just please appreciate I did try my best. Now to the video. Let's see how Ranger does with its theoretical max. The first category is the theoretical max. Ranger, in theory, could obtain meteor bars from a gold chest near the underworld, allowing for its most busted weapon to be used. For each category and loadouts, we fought the boss 3 times and averaged how long it took to beat the boss. Ranger, after 3 attempts, averaged 13 seconds. Oh, worst one yet. Unfortunate, Ranger. Why do you suck? Now let's see how the other classes compare and divvy out the appropriate points. Mage has a fascinating build with mystic robes, jungle pants, and a wizard hat. They wield the demon scythe, aqua scepter, crimson rod, and flower of fire. The aqua scepter and flower of fire can be obtained because theoretically you can break into the dungeon with a gold key from a wooden chest and open up a single golden chest. So every class is allowed to use demon chest gear and a single dungeon item. Mage's flower of fire has the highest potential DPS, but with platforms in the way and the eye flying, it's often hard to hit. But by staying close and keeping the eye around the cloud, we can maximize our damage with a mix of the flower and demon scythe. Mage finishes with an average of 15.3 seconds. Now Melee, who can obtain the Knight's Edge with his 1 dungeon loot item, I was also told by a min-maxer that the gi combined with the molten helmet and leggings gives you the highest DPS, but that doesn't overcome its range disadvantage, leaving it at an average 24.6 seconds. Finally, there's Summoner, who will have a distinct disadvantage in this category, as the Summoner doesn't have many sequence breaks. I doubt it's going to really beat anything, actually, because this is feeling like, yes, fast, but not stupid fast, like the theoretical max needs to be. What I did was use 2 vampire frogs and 2 flinxes. This resulted in the worst time yet, 35 seconds, not even close to its competitors. With these scores, Ranger is awarded 3 points, Mage 2 points, Melee 1 point, and Summoner 0. With 0 deaths suffered, no bonus points are awarded either. For this phase, we also need to test these same loadouts against King Slime. The results were exactly the same. Ranger averaging 11.6 seconds, Mage 17.6, Melee close with 18.6 seconds, and Summoner with 28. All their scores are doubled. That is how we test the absolute max, but there are 3 more categories to count for the Eye and King Slime. Next up are the wiki recommendations. These aren't nearly as straightforward as you might assume because there are often several options for best weaponry, so I attempted to choose what I thought was the best amongst the options listed. And for the accessories, we usually stuck with what the absolute max had because the wiki only really listed class-specific accessories rather than a specific loadouts. There are also multiple options, for example the boomstick for Ranger, a favorite that allowed me to clear the eye in 46 seconds. However, if you can nail your aim in the first phase with the blood rainbow, you can clear that much faster, with the second attempt taking 42 seconds and the third one shaving it all the way down to 32 seconds. This averages out to 40 seconds. For keeping score, that average is all that matters, but nobody always plays perfect, and the wiki recommended both. So although we could bring that average down, that's where it'll stay. But I'll let you know when the highs and lows have outliers like this in case you want to really know which one has the fastest potential speed. But compared to Mage, Ranger doesn't hold a candle, with Mage averaging 16.3 seconds, with 2 attempts only taking 14 seconds, and 1 per attempt taking 21. Melee clears at a very consistent pace, averaging 24.6 seconds, and Summoner pulling up in the rear with 35. The same score as the theoretical max because the wiki already recommends the best possible gear you could theoretically get. Mage claims the crown this time, making its final score much closer to Ranger, with Summoner still not on the board, but that's what's to be expected of the early game Summoner. Hard mode is likely where this class will get to play some catch-up. These same builds against King Slime mix things up a bit. Mage still claims top spot with an average of 17.6 seconds, but Summoner makes a surprise upset with 31.6, Ranger takes third with 35.3, and Melee drops to last with 38. Mage is now sitting in its rightful place at first, but that will change here very quickly, because now we're going to look at the very subjective path of least resistance category. This is where Mage has to use the gear it's most often mocked for, gem stabs. For this one, I selected the Ruby Staff and Robe. These are not necessarily easy to get, and I initially wanted to do Amber, which is not only better, but also more consistently obtainable, but it was decided after some counsel from Keppels that the desert early game is quite difficult unless you're pretty skilled at the game, and so I went with Ruby instead. For 2 battles, I used the Crimson Rod, winning in 35 and 42 seconds, but for the final battle, I removed the Cloud and ended in 1 minute and 5 seconds, bringing the average to 47.3. You might even think allowing Ruby gear was too much for this category, but for Ranger, we're allowing full fossil armor, but with a demon bow and flaming arrows. I think this is a quite fair loadout for this category, although it resulted in an average 84.3 seconds. Melee really struggles in this category with only gold armor, the Blood Butcher, and Light's Bane. You may have noticed that there was no jungle gear thus far. That's because it was determined too dangerous for this category, holding Mage back from jungle armor, Ranger from Boomstick, Melee from the Blade of Grass, and Summoner from the Snapthorn. For Melee, we stuck with the Blood Butcherer instead of the Light's Bane, whose damage and lack of a debuff makes it a much worse option than spamming the Star Fury, which, if well aimed, does about equivalent damage to the Blood Butcher, and mixing the two effectively shaved off a little extra time, bringing Melee's average to 67.3. Summoner is a little more competitive in this category due to its minimal build being closer to its best possible builds than the other classes. That said, it still averaged at 1 minute and 16 seconds, about 9 seconds away from Melee, changing our total scores like this, with Mage surprisingly having the edge, but maybe we did Ranger dirty in that category. Unfortunately for Ranger, we still need to use these builds against King Slime, or at least that's what I would say, if the script hadn't gone right out the window. Summoner takes the crown for best in class against King Slime with a minimal build and a 62.6 second average. Ranger claims second at 76 seconds, Mage falls to third at 85.6, and Melee only managed 110 seconds, or 1 minute 40. But not only that, because I actually also died while using the Melee build. This should give all the other classes a point because I didn't suffer a loss with any of them, but I think that maybe we shouldn't rub salt into the wound of a class pulling in last place. The idea of the points for not dying is to give the more defensive and less offensive builds a better shot, and I was trying to play extra aggressive to give Melee a better chance, so we'll just say no bonus point for this one, or I guess no bonus point if the only class that ever died was also the one that got in last place. Finally, for pre-boss, we have the survey loadouts. For these, I looked at the survey and used only the most voted for accessories and their strongest potential upgrades. People voted based on what items they regularly use. The reason for this was so I would be using a loadout that the more average Terraria enjoyer or player is using. As for the weapons, I generally pick the top 2 unless there was some more that were really close, in which case I might have 3, or if one was way ahead of the others, then I might just have 1. For Ranger, there's a conundrum of ammo. In an effort to shorten the survey so it was short enough that people would, actually fill it out, I had to put many things into broad categories, such as flaming arrows were grouped together, then all the piercing ones were grouped together, and then there was wooden arrows. For these, I picked the best of the bunch, though in hard mode I may lean more towards what I generally see people use instead. Also, the people voting aren't exactly coordinating their loadouts, and so it's not unlikely some strange loadouts will be made because 2 different popular strategies might have a few crossovers in weapons and accessories. As for potions and support weapons, these could only be used if 50% of the people voting said that they used them. All that said, this is likely why Ranger has a strange loadout with a golden bow and frostburn arrows alongside a boomstick with regular musket balls. It's really the messy hive mind loadout, but for Ranger lovers, that works out great because the boomstick is fantastic and lands itself in first against the eye at 41.6 seconds. Mage slows all the way down to 71 seconds. Melee, meanwhile, had a more consistent time, but didn't hit the highs or lows of Mage, and somehow ended up with the 71-second average as well. But Summoner clutches second place with 60 seconds. Because of the tie, we'll award Melee and Mage 0.5 points. And with our first Mage comparison for the survey category done, I think I'm starting to see why people don't like Mage. Apparently, everybody is playing it wrong, just like I keep on saying. This poll has 55,000 votes, by the way, meaning over 40,000 people think Mage is the worst class. I will prove you wrong with this, I hope. Against King Slime, these loadouts remain in their places, with Ranger averaging 41 seconds, Mage falls behind with 80, Melee remains consistent at 71, and Summoner locks in a stronger place in second at 50.6 seconds. That completes the competition in the pre-boss phase of the game, with Ranger claiming gold, Mage in second, then Summoner and Melee. Now this next round of testing is going to be the weirdest of all of them, and it's going to include a whopping 4 bosses. For this next round, we're going to be using all pre-evil bosses and pre-goblin gear against the evil bosses, but also against Deerclops and Queen Bee. The reason for this is that Queen Bee and Deerclops are in a really weird place where they can realistically be fought anywhere in progression. I'm sure when in progression we decide to fight them would make a difference in the end results, but this was where I thought it'd be most consistent. With that said, let's take a look at how they perform against these bosses, starting with the theoretical max where Summoner is going to suffer, capping out at 1 minute and 39 seconds. Melee, although in a stronger position, naturally struggles with hitting the bee consistently, averaging 65.6 seconds with an impressive 50-second low. Mage, now that the eye and slime are down, has access to the Grey Zappinator, which is a big help against the bee since the demon size struggles, but also introduces a high degree of randomness, allowing it to hit a low of 49 seconds with an average of 58. However, I also suffered a death while using this build. Meanwhile, Ranger has access to the Star Cannon, once again blowing away the competition. Ranger has been undefeated in the maxed out category, but that, at long last, changes with Deerclops. Although very strong, the Star Cannon can't abuse its infinite pierce, nor is able to hit the target far more than the other classes are able to. It still manages second place with 50 seconds, but Mage sneaks in a victory at 42 seconds with a low of 38. This is without the Zappinator as well, purely Demon Scythe and Crimson Rod. For Summoner, I used the wrong defensive armors, but that won't shave off more than the 15 seconds it need to catch up to Ranger, who is in second place with 66.6 seconds, and Melee surprisingly places last at 83.3. Unfortunately for everyone who isn't a Ranger lover, Star Cannon shreds the Eater of Worlds. This is just unfair! Unfair, I say. 17 seconds. That's all it took. Only slowed down because the Eater was digging in the ground. That's impressive, but Melee has a surprise up its sleeve. For the Eater of Worlds specifically, the Blue Moon and Sun Fury, which you can now use in tandem, just barely come short of the Star Cannon with a 20-second average. With the perfect worm spawn, maybe you could even outdo the Star Cannon, but I didn't get that in my testing. You might think for Mage that the Demon Scythe is a no-brainer, but it has limited piercing, and you often can't can't line up your shots. Rather, the Aqua Scepter proves much more efficient at shredding this boss, but it can't compare to the other two and only managed 32 seconds. For Summoner, we tried using just a whip with summons as support, and once with using Fox Sparks as our main weapon. Fox Sparks was faster, but still only managed 39 seconds on average. Melee gains some ground, but Ranger extends its lead even further. Only the brain remains for this category, where we see more of the same. Even accounting for Ranger potentially missing several shots by targeting the wrong brain, we still average 16.6 seconds against the brain with a Star Cannon, surprisingly even faster than the Worm. Mage comes close using the Aqua Scepter at 21.6 seconds, and Melee is right behind Mage at 23.3 seconds, but could maybe sneak in a lead if it managed to clear every creeper right at the start. And Summoner, who really is done the dirtiest by this category, is last again at 29 seconds. And everybody is going to continue having a problem with Ranger as we get to the wiki recommendations, because the wiki also is recommending the Star Cannon. Now, one thing to note about this category is that even though every other category is pre-evil boss, we will be using whatever the wiki recommends, regardless of where it is in progression. So Ranger's times will remain exactly the same, as its wiki recommended gear lineup is like exactly what the max gear is. So with Ranger locking in first place against all four bosses in this category, the others will have to fight for the scraps, and Summoner, who the wiki recommends the beast set for, is able to claim second place with 58.6 seconds. Mage has some wild variances, with the Zapinator going for a minute 5 and a minute 36, with the Demon Scythe proving the best option with a 60-second time. The average lands on 73.6 seconds, which puts it ahead of Melee's average 85. Against Queen Bee, I ended up using the wrong best wiki gear for Melee, mostly because it's not as straightforward for Queen Bee. But upon noticing this while editing, I quickly did some more testing, replacing Crimson Armor with Molten and the Blade of Grass with the Volcano, which, as you can imagine, did wonders for its performance. It was last place, but now takes second behind Ranger's busted Star Cannon with 56.3 seconds. Summoner takes third at 67.6, and Mage struggles with only 75.6 seconds. Although having very minor changes without an Aqua Scepter for a consistently high damage, Mage can be really hit or miss depending on which attacks Queen Bee uses and how well you can position yourself. Against the Worm, the Ranger has 17 seconds with the Star Cannon. Mage is slowed down without having the Aqua Scepter again, but still takes second place with 48 seconds. Summoner lands in third at 62, and Melee is dead last at 73. It could maybe be faster, as the guide does technically mention the Volcano, but it's kind of sequence breaking for the Eater of Worlds, and the wiki generally doesn't recommend things that break sequence, so it is not allowed. Ranger's reign of Star Cannon terror comes to an end against the Brain, where it still places first, but at least the other classes should be more competitive in the other categories after this one. But for the Brain, the other three classes are all within spitting distance of each other. Melee places last, although I did end up using a Flamerang, which breaks some of the sequence, but it's still in last, so no harm, no foul at 36 seconds. Summoner takes a solid 35, and Mage manages to sneak into second with 33 seconds. I did die, however, since I still beat the boss, this won't count as bonus points for the others. Oh, well, we still beat it though. Thus far, Ranger has absolutely abused its ability to get the Star Cannon relatively early in the game. But now we move on to the two categories against these bosses that it can't abuse that power. For the path of least resistance, we'll start with the evil bosses, where Ranger still manages to claim first against the Brain with just a Demon Bow and Unholy Arrows, averaging 61 seconds. Mage is naturally going to struggle against the Brain without solid piercing options. We also didn't use the Cloud, which could be easily obtained and allow Mage to do better, but we'll just leave it as is, partially to fight against my own bias for Mage. Plus, I think it was fair the way that we did it. You never know if you're actually going to get it. Surprisingly, Mage would likely have taken second place with a Cloud, but ended up tied for it instead against Melee, which really surprised me, both averaging 83 seconds. Both will get 1 point. Summoner with the Vasculash is slow once again and only did it in 94 seconds. Summoner performs slightly better against the Eater of Worlds, which I really should have used the Soul Scourge or Scourge against, but we'll let it slide. With one particularly good fight bringing down the average, it lands on 3 minutes and 19 seconds, putting it just behind Melee at 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Mage is all over the board with this one because for one battle we allowed the use of the Vilethorn, and for one we didn't. It is very easy to get this thing, but again, it's not guaranteed. With the Vile Thorn, Mage achieves 2 minutes and 2 seconds, and without it, 3 minutes and 41 seconds, showing that Mage's capabilities against this boss rely almost entirely on the Vile Thorn dropping in a timely manner. But with these two, it averages 2 minutes and 51 seconds. A solid showing, but of course Ranger has Jester's Arrows, taking it down in a minute 40. That said, Jester's Arrows are not great at protecting you from Vile Spit, resulting in 1 failed attempt. That's plus 1 point for everybody else. Now, it's been a while since Summoner got to shine, so let's shine a light on its performance with a minimal build against Deerclops, where it managed the fastest time at 2 minutes and 17 seconds, although it also suffered a few deaths along the way. Unexpectedly, Mage manages to come close at 2 minutes and 27 seconds. Ranger is finally slowed down, landing in third at 3 minutes and 59 seconds, and Melee truly struggles against this boss with minimal progression, taking a whopping 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Against Queen Bee, Mage pulls a major upset, likely due to the Thunder Zapper's recent buff and its very fast-moving projectile. It rockets into first place with an average of 96.3 seconds. Second place was Ranger, all the way back with 192 seconds, or 3 minutes and 12 seconds. And Ranger even got the boomstick this time because presumably if you're fighting Queen Bee, you have collected jungle loot, so we allowed it. Melee struggles quite a lot with just the Blood Butcher and Blade of Grass with a massive range from their 3 minutes and 15 seconds to 3 minutes and 58 seconds. Average is 3 minutes and 35 seconds with 1 death, and Summoner, the class you would likely want to be fighting the Bee with this early on, stumbles onto an average 5 minutes and 20 seconds, also with a death. But since the 2 last place classes died, no point will be given to Major Ranger. That wraps up the minimal build, so finally, how do the survey loadouts compare against these 4 bosses? Mage holds strong as by far the best at a minute 52 against Queen Bee, and Ranger takes second with 2 minutes and 46 seconds, but I also suffered a death. Melee and Summoner were truly neck and neck, with them tying on every time except one, where Melee managed to go 2 seconds faster. Summoner also died once. Since Ranger placed second and died, Melee will get a bonus point for not dying. Mage dominates the field against Deerclops again, but Summoner suddenly leapfrogs into second place, narrowly beating Ranger by 3 seconds, and Melee is left in everyone's dust. When we take it to the evil bosses, Mage thinks it's a lucky star as people voted for the Vile Thorn, granting it first once again at 71 seconds. Melee didn't get blessed with the Ball of Hurt, but the Blade of Grass is just as good and lands it in second with an average of 95 seconds. Ranger isn't too far off, but is surprisingly behind with 107 seconds and another death to its name. And Summoner, very strangely in my opinion, was last place at 134 seconds. All classes but Ranger get a bonus point. Finally, we hit the brain with a very close competition. Mage takes a crown at 58 seconds, Summoner second at 64, and Ranger right on its heels at 66. Only Melee was uncompetitive, landing at 82 seconds. With these survey results, suddenly Mage is looking really good, and that's probably in large part due to people grabbing jungle armor so early in the game. Regardless, it claimed a lot of victories on the survey results. We will now advance to the next phase of progression with Skeletron, where we can finally start combining accessories. Starting with the survey results this time, people who play the Melee class are not shy about gathering Hellstone before Skeletron, giving them a strong advantage against this boss, placing them in first with 2 minutes and 17 seconds. Summoner wasn't too far behind at 2 minutes and 24 seconds using 2 Imps and 1 Hornet, and Ranger was only 1 second behind that with a Mini Shark and Boomstick. Mage meanwhile got saddled with the Space Gun and weirdly the Bead Gun but no high pack, or support weapons for that matter, making it fall way into last place at 3 minutes and 17 seconds. In the Path of Least Resistance category, Mage shoots straight to the top by simply adding the Crimson Rod, shaving 40 seconds off of its previous time. But its first place positioning isn't solely because of that cloud, but because I decided Hellstone was a post-Skeletron item. But all things considered at this point, it's not exactly that hard to get the stuff, so perhaps I was a bit unfair here. Summoner wasn't that affected by this nerf, still managing 2 minutes and 42 seconds on average. Keep in mind, this was while doing flinxes in some fights and the Shroomy Boys and others. Ultimately, the time difference between the two was negligible. Same with trying Star Crash instead of the Snapthorn or even mixing the two. Ranger isn't too far behind with 3 minutes and 1 second. Melee Melee was the one that truly suffered under these conditions, now taking 4 minutes and 44 seconds. In hindsight, this may be a bit unfair, but I still stand by Hellstone being a more post-Skeletron thing, especially when keeping in mind that noobs probably don't get the stuff until they actually go to fight the wall afresh. But that's just where the vast subjectivity of this category comes into play. After all, most people in the community said that they use Hellstone items. So of course, just disagree with me on this one or keep track of your own tally. I did have a lot of fun using the phase blade like this though. Now that we move to the wiki, Ranger is blessed once again by the Star Cannon and takes top spot at 56 seconds. Mage gets to use the Zappinator and some support weapons that put it in second place with 86. Summoner recommends the Imp Staff over Fox Sparks for some reason, which I'll explain in a little bit. That aside, Summoner placed third with 103 seconds and Melee placed last at 109. And Melee places last again in the theoretical max category at 83 seconds. There really just isn't a lot you can really do to up Melee's damage at this point. I did try planting the phase blade for a little extra damage, but it only lands on solid blocks, not platforms, so ultimately it's a bit tricky to use and to add any extra damage. Ranger was first, of course, with its dumb Star Cannon. Summoner I found was more effective when using Fox Sparks as a summon rather than the Imps, with it attacking faster, more accurately, and with higher base damage. Not sure why it's listed as best above the Imps on the wiki with all that in mind. Maybe it's just because it's hard to find? I don't know. It allowed Summoner to take silver at 63 seconds, outcompeting Mage at 66. Skeletron down, we move to the final boss of pre-hard mode, where the 4 categories are going to be a lot closer to each other than they have been, if not exactly the same, simply because most of the stuff you use against the wall aren't that difficult to get. Ranger gets to take advantage of the dumb Star Cannon some more, clearing the wall in 35 seconds. I thought the other classes might be able to overcome this time, but Melee was closest at 40 seconds. Summoner is very close to Melee at 42 with 1 narrowly failed attempt. I also tried 2 strategies, one with 3 Imps and 2 Vampire Frogs, and another with 5 of the Mushroom Boys, who recently have been shown to be quite effective against the wall, but still I ended up with 42 seconds. It can be done a lot faster, but this is where my personal decision to do all these tests with no reforges holds Summoner back from its potential. In theory, all 4 classes are being held back to the same degree, but in all likelihood, maxing reforges perfectly could lead to different results, but with plenty of debate over best reforges and the bonus points for fewest deaths making warding feel out of place, I decided to do everything plain. So you can only improve upon the times I've recorded. Mage could theoretically get a lucky shot with the Zappinator to nearly insta-kill, but pure RNG can't be relied upon, and so I ended up with a speed of merely 50 seconds. Wiki recommended the same build as the max for Ranger and Mage. Melee exchanges the Gi for full Molten Armor, slowing it down by 8 seconds, and Summoner, ever the consistent one, with 1 Imp and 2 Flinxes and 2 Vampire Frogs, per the Wiki's recommendations, ends with the exact same time as the other 2 builds I tried for maxing things out, while also still failing 1 battle. When we start using the minimal builds, we get some more interesting results. Summoner takes first with a clean 60 seconds while only using Imps because that's what most people would assume is best at this point. That said, for Summoner, it's a little tricky of a class to play against the wall if you can't shred it optimally, so I had 3 failures. Melee would easily have beaten this time if it weren't for the fact that it was Melee and we can't simply hug the wall without dying with a simpler build, so we were forced to retreat a bit and yet still manage a respectable time of 65 seconds. Also ended up failing 2 attempts. Mage also died twice and was just behind Melee with 67 seconds, but you might be wondering why on earth I'm using the Aqua Scepter. Well, because the Demon Scythe can be hard to aim, even against the wall, especially from longer distances. The Aqua Scepter is a high and much more reliable source of damage. Ranger, much to my surprise, placed last in this category with the Hellwing Bow and Phoenix Blaster. Probably should have used Hellfire arrows, but whatever, Ranger doesn't need any help right now. Plus, Ranger was the only one that never had a failed attempt, so it gets a bonus point anyways. Ranger used the same setup based on the survey results, and so placed a much more respectable second because people said they primarily used the Demon Scythe and Space Gun for Mage. So here's your evidence that Demon Scythe is worse. Mage dropped to last place with 92 seconds using that rather than the Aqua Scepter. As for who plays first against the wall, that would be Summoner, where Survey seems to understand something that I didn't. Survey only replaced the Feral Claws with the Worm Scarf when compared with the minimal build, which you would think lowers our DPS, but because the damage resistance kept our health up much better, we were able to position ourselves more optimally to shave off 5 seconds from the least resistance build.
That made a huge difference.
All things considered, maybe I should have used the Scarf for the minimal build for Summoner as well, but Summoner was first anyway, so it doesn't really change anything. That said, I still died once. For melee, people tried using the Sun Fury and Blue Moon combo as well as the Knight's Edge, but those flails don't stack up very well here, or at least not as well as they did against the Eater, so we stuck with the Knight's Edge, but since Survey voted for more survivability, we lost a lot of time, going up to 92 seconds, and still failed an attempt in spite of it. Mage and Ranger get a bonus point for not dying. With that, we're finally done with pre-hard mode. Entering hard mode, I'm going to need to explain a few things, because for these bosses in particular, the absolute max most specifically can get real fuzzy with specific niches and setups being even more capable than what I'm about to show you. I can't keep track of all of those, and so decided for this video, I just stick with regular arenas and quote-unquote normal uses of weapons. I'll try to keep a pinned comment that at least mentions how certain classes can really shit off time in ridiculously optimized settings, so if you know of them, let me know in the comments. I'm also sure many of them require reforges to be as good as they are, which is another reason I've left them out. Now, take everything I just said and throw it out the window, because Ranger may not have the Star Cannon, but it does have the Coin Gun, and theoretically, you could collect infinite money, allowing you to use only Platinum coins. I hate myself. Now I'm really motivated to pin comments of even faster kills by other classes. 18 seconds is the time. Now, the other classes might not be as far behind as you think, because they can benefit from beating Fishron before any of the other bosses. Of course, Ranger can too, but Platinum coins are always going to be better. Also for Fishron, I'm going to save testing stuff against Fishron for like post Plantera or maybe Golem, because frankly, killing him before Mechs just sucks. I've never done it, and I don't want to. With that, Mage is able to come very close to a Platinum coin armed coin gun with 22 seconds. Summoner behind that is at 27 seconds, and Melee, who benefits the least from Fishron, is last with 37. Against the twins, everyone's positions remain the same. Ranger clears in 32 seconds, Mage in 41, Summoner close with 43, and Melee at 63. Then there's Prime, where Platinum coins tear right through and finish in 24 seconds. Mage holds a spot in second at 34 seconds, Summoner with 39, and Melee at a cool 60. But against Destroyer, we suddenly see a different story, just not for Melee. I couldn't get any of its strategies to match the other three. It's last again with 45 seconds. Poor Melee. Summoner is where things get real funky.
Whoa! Whoa! Electric Eel does crazy things to the worm. Dang!
Mage can also shred with the Life Drain, but not as fast as Summoner, coming in at 17 seconds. And Ranger tries to hold on to some semblance of dominance with the Star Cannon, but it's a pre-hard mode weapon and can't keep up, finishing in a still impressive 24 seconds. Now to the wiki, where the coin gun is still in play, but the wiki specifically says gold coins. This, on top of the decision to remove the Lilith's necklace, led to Ranger dying during one of the attempts, since the coin gun doesn't pierce and the kill was slow enough to take a few hits. It still finishes in first at 45 seconds. Well, that's what I would say, if this hadn't happened. That was 15 seconds, and the Zappinator dealt nearly 16,000 damage instantaneously. That would be stupid to count, but it did happen. So we'll give Mage 1 bonus point, but we'll only use the time from when it didn't happen, where our time shoots up to 92 seconds, and we also suffered a death. That puts Mage in third. Summoner takes second place with the Firecracker and Sanguine Staff, killing Queen Slime in 79 seconds, and Melee took almost 2 minutes. But Melee should have been more competitive using the Flint, it's just not recommended on the wiki as of the making of this video. That said, Summoner and Melee were the only ones who didn't die, awarding them both a much needed bonus point. Ranger wins against Twins at 79 seconds. I tried Firecracker with Sanguine Bats, but the Cool Wit with the Blade Staff was far superior, bringing Summoner to second at 1 minute and 52 seconds. Mage gets slowed down dramatically dramatically, thanks in large part to the Golden Shower not being recommended as a support item and not being listed as one of the best single or group weapons, which are the only ones I'm letting myself use from the wiki here. I also died twice, which grants melee a bonus point for not dying, which is great for melee because it's just not built for quickly killing these flying bosses. The same wiki that held back the Golden Shower, though, did recommend a life drain, which lets Mage shred in this category against the Destroyer, but at 27 seconds this time. Ranger's Star Cannon slows slightly with 30 seconds, though I had to do that separately because I somehow missed that Ranger gets a Star Cannon on the wiki, so ignore this footage. Summoner benefits most from the Firecracker and Sanguine Staff combo against this boss and scores 3rd place at 82 seconds. Melee shines a little bit brighter with the Dribbler Crippler, taking down the Worm in 94 seconds, but it's still dead last. Ranger, who at this point just seems too far ahead to beat, claims gold again against Prime, taking him down in 62 seconds with 1 failed attempt. Summoner placed 2nd with 2 minutes and 29 seconds and 4 deaths. Mage needs a little explaining, because I ended up switching its loadout. Generally, I tried to keep a mostly DPS build from more the max build alongside the wiki's recommended weapons, but Mage can't exactly boost its DPS that much with accessories, so I ended up with a mostly meaningless mana regen build with poor movements and died 8 times to Prime until I switched out some accessories so I could get knockback immunity and swap balloons for wings, which I did for every subsequent class after that. I had been told that balloons are better, maybe they once were, but I can't see where you possibly get that from now. With proper mobility, I didn't die once and took down Prime in 3 minutes and 30 seconds, a tie with Melee, who also got 3 minutes and 30 seconds, but Melee gets a bonus point for not dying when Summoner did with its faster time. Now, Summoner's simplest build, or Path of Least Resistance build, is a bit awkward because Spider Armor and Summons are a very obvious choice, but the Firecracker and Cool Whip are not always the easiest whips to get. The Firecracker is in some ways easier because you can beat the wall with a certain level of regularity, but you have to keep on waiting for the guide to appear and then hope you get the right weapon out of the treasure bag or the Firecracker, not to mention the wall is just kind of annoying to farm. The Cool Whip is more consistent in being able to craft it, but only if you happen to get a blizzard, which is no guarantee. However, what I found was that the Firecracker paired with a maxed out Abigail absolutely shredded Queen Slime, and from what I can tell, Firecracker is more commonly used and Abigail, of course, is very easy to obtain. Summoner will struggle a lot more with dealing with the Slime's minions, resulting in 1 failure, but also 1 in a mere 32 seconds. Surprisingly, it's actually Melee that placed 2nd in this category, all the way back at 88 seconds. But with the introduction of the Flint, it's now capable of beating Queen Slime a bit faster. Mage has a Sky Fracture, Meteor Staff, and Golden Shower. Good weapons and all, but not especially strong against Queen Slime, completing the battle in 103 seconds. And Ranger places in last with the Onyx Blaster and Crystal Bullets, a combo I'm sure many people find themselves using. Everyone gets a bonus point for not dying like Summoner did. These same builds naturally see a few changes in positioning depending on which mech we face with them. Assuming Queen Slime is defeated, we are using the Blade Staff against the twins with the Cool Whip, which I figure is just as minimal as the Firecracker, so we'll just use whichever one is best for each mech. In this instance, Summoner rushes into the lead at the 2-minute mark. Mage, seemingly ever the best at placing 2nd, wins it again at 3 minutes and 1 second. And Melee somehow, even with just the Shadow Flame Knife, narrowly beats Ranger with 3 minutes and 28 seconds, with Ranger only 5 seconds behind. This is likely thanks in large part due to the buff that the Shadow Flame Knife received in the update. I'd also add I had really good aim with Ranger, so it's not that I was missing or anything. Mage benefits greatly from the Meteor Staff against Destroyer, completing it in 1 minute and 9 seconds. Summoner, surprisingly, a little bit behind the Cool Whip and Blade Staff. I tried the Firecracker, but without the Sanguine Staff, it doesn't have a good minion pairing, and the Sanguine Staff we're not using because that's a bit out of your way to get. I thought the Flint might carry Melee here, but surprisingly, it did very little to the Coil. That said, it performed admirably for the rest of the battle, clocking in at 2 minutes and 8 seconds. I could maybe justify using the Tao of Pow here, but getting a Hallowed and Corrupt Desert can be hit or miss without making it yourself. Meanwhile, Ranger takes last against the Mechs as well. Crystal Bullets and the Onyx Blaster are fine against the Coil, but afterwards, it really slows down. Finally, there's Prime, where Summoner asserts its minimal build dominance, clearing in 2 minutes and 21 seconds. Melee boggles my mind by taking 2nd place with 3 minutes and 22 seconds, while Mage is a little behind at 3 minutes and 39 seconds, though it also would have likely beaten Melee if it weren't for the Shadow Flame Knife buff. And Ranger ever so slowly finishes its attempt at 4 minutes and 27 seconds. Finally, we get to the survey where a few weird things mess with our times. My own indecisiveness about Summoner's build is not without reason, and with two very different viable builds that require specific pairings of weapons, Summoner is greatly slowed by using the Firecracker with the Spider Staff against Queen Slime. This allows Mage to take first place, albeit by a very thin margin, although Mage is in a weird position where so many people voted for the Golden Shower with no conclusive secondary weapon that it literally is only the Golden Shower that we're allowed to use in this category against all these bosses. Melee lost access to the Flint and has a slightly more defensive build, but comes in at third place at precisely 2 minutes, and Ranger sees no change in his loadout, leaving it in last place with 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Against the Twins, we have a very competitive race with Mage placing first at 3 minutes and 21 seconds. Melee saw no change but finishes in second at 3:28, and Ranger also sees no change, remaining right behind them at 3 minutes and 33 seconds. This is where the issue with the survey starts plaguing Summoner, because we're saddled with the Firecracker and Blade Staff, a horrendous combo that was still competitive at 3 minutes and 46 seconds. But then Summoner is stuck with this build against Destroyer, which is just about the worst thing you could possibly have asked for. I never actually managed to win a fight like this either, only bringing the worm to maybe a quarter of its health and the time the others had already finished, so it's last with an estimated completion time of 5 minutes. Now again, this is just looking at the survey results and choosing whichever ones happen to have the highest or most people voting for them. I have zero doubt in my mind that almost zero Summoner players actually play this way. This is just what happened because of the way that we're doing this. Mage's survey build, meanwhile, performed surprisingly well against Destroyer, even with just the Golden Shower as a primary weapon. But what I didn't mention earlier is that the Nimbus Rod actually received 50.8% of the vote, allowing for it to be used here by the slimmest of margins. Ranger fights to maintain its lead, this time having the Daedalus Stormbow with Unholy Arrows to pound the worm after the coil is gone, clearing it in 93 seconds. Melee sits in third, performing adequately while being saddled with only the Shadow Flame Knife. Luckily for Summoner, its survey build is not all bad, beating Prime the fastest at 2 minutes and 45 seconds with 2 failed attempts. Melee does pretty well with 3 minutes and 21 seconds. Mage is third, likely due to no high base damage weapons, and Ranger has the same loadout as the minimal build, and so ends in last again. That finishes the next stage of the game, and the competition is starting to heat up, with Ranger losing a lot of its lead in those fights, and Summoner is pretty well known for how fast it can beat many of these upcoming bosses. Melee is in last, but considering what the class is actually designed for, that's not a huge surprise. Now let's move on to Plantera, the most annoying boss to test against. But let's see what happens when we push their limits. Summoner is pretty strong, but doesn't excel nearly as much here. Apparently Spider Armor may be higher damage here, but I think the Chlorified Armor was actually more effective, which I'll prove in later builds, and it finishes in 25 seconds. Melee can apparently do some real damage with the Fatigued Claw things, but I'm going to have to assume that's with Reforges as well, because I couldn't get them to work very well, and so had to use the Flare-On, which placed Melee in last at 27 seconds. Ranger still had its best showing, with Platinum Coins and the Coin Gun killing Plantera in 18 seconds, but amazingly, Mage actually beats Platinum Coins with the Bubble Gun, especially effective against Plantera. When we enter the Wiki category, Summoner retakes first place while using Spider Armor to clear in 51 seconds, and the very simple build of Chlorophyte Shot Bow with Ichor Arrows comes in second with a respectable 60 seconds, with Mage on its heels at 64. Melee falls a bit more at 78. Summoner sees very little change, only now I'm using Chlorophyte Armor as well as some less optimized damage accessories in the minimal category, and yet this performs better than the more damage-focused Wiki build, shaving off 3 seconds and taking first again. Ranger, funnily enough, had the exact same thing while using the quote-unquote less damage-optimized build, coming in at 60 seconds once again. But that puts it behind Mage this time, who also has a less quote-unquote damage-optimized build the Wiki recommends and kills Plantera 7 seconds faster this time. Perhaps these quote-unquotes that I'm adding, though, would make more of a difference if I was using Reforges, so we'll be fair there. This further proves to me, though, that people underestimate the power of the Leaf Crystal. Melee is still last, but manages to close close a gap with its competitors. These are all theoretically much easier builds than the wiki recommended ones as well, and yet they did better, but again, maybe that's just because reforges make a difference there, but I doubt it. When we look at what the community tends to use, the Ranger sees a very minor decrease in damage with a few accessory swaps, but the same weapons. Summoner would likely have remained top dog if this poll were done in a few more months or a year or something, as it seems people are still using hollowed armor, which slows Summoner down, but still earns it second place at 77 seconds. Melee you would think would be last with turtle armor, and it's certainly slower at 120 seconds, but Mage gets the worst of it, but I can't fathom how or why. Somehow, more people said they used hallowed armor over glorified armor, and by a decent-sized margin as Mage class. That just makes zero sense to me. I don't know. Why? On top of that, the Rainbow Rod and Golden Shower were the most voted for weapons. Both are fine, but the Golden Shower is no longer viable as a standalone weapon, and the Rainbow Rod in second phase struggles with hitting the plant hard as it keeps homing in on the little bitey boys. With that, Summoner, Mage, and Ranger are all in the running for top class as we move on to Golem. We'll continue in the survey category, where Summoner leaves everyone else in the dust at 35 seconds. Melee somehow found its way into second at 95 seconds. Mage was held back a bit against Golem in particular because most people voted for Spectre and Shadowbeam staves, likely because they are more effective against other bosses around this tier, while for Golem the Inferno Fork would have been best. Ranger is way back in the pack, though at 2 minutes and 47 seconds, even while focusing so hard on the body that we never even broke a single fist before defeating the boss. What survey says, though, isn't always the best or easiest. For minimal builds, I chose Tiki Armor over Spooky Wood. Still used a Papyrus Scarab, figuring I'd allow for some Pumpkin Moon drops, but the Dark Harvest in particular can be real annoying to farm for. For the Dark Harvest, we managed 35 seconds, and the Morning Star, we hit 42. I'm going to stick with 42, but either way, Summoner is first. This time, we'll grab the Inferno Fork for a Mage, because, well, it's not that hard to get, granting it second at 64 seconds. Glorified Armor allows Melee to beat out Ranger for third, even when Ranger switches to Nail Gun and Shroomite Armor with corresponding headpiece, which is also the build that the wiki recommends, putting Ranger in last place for that category as well. Summoner has the option to use the Desert Tiger Staff or Deadly Spheres, thanks to the wiki, but the Seers are best for this boss and clear it in 28 seconds. Mage manages 40 seconds thanks to having some more support items available to it, and Melee claims third at 54 seconds. And now for the absolute max builds. Summoner continues its ascent. Now that post Plantera, it can theoretically obtain the Kaleidoscope and Terra Prisma before Golem, if you were weird enough to do that. Only took 16 seconds. The Bubble Gun and wealth of support weapons give Mage 28 seconds, but in order to take advantage of the Bubble Gun, I had to play it extra close, resulting in 1 death, earning a point for Ranger and Melee, who are behind Mage but didn't die. Melee has a Death Grip on third place, where the Starlight clears in 28 seconds, and I tried really hard to make Ranger work, trying the Tsunami with Icar arrows, the Eventide bow, but that's not a great weapon for Golem. I tried Venom arrows and then Holy arrows, which ended up being the fastest time with 31 seconds, but that keeps it in last, and also keeps it anyone's game between Mage, Summoner, and Ranger as we head on to Duke Fishron. Summoner gets to use the Terra Prisma and Kaleidoscope combo once again to clear Fishron in 30 seconds. The Stellar Tune rocks him in 59 seconds, but Ranger beats Mage at 43 seconds because the Platinum Coin Gun makes a return to clear this thing. Meanwhile, Melee falls to last at 1 minute and 21 using a Flying Dragon. You might be wondering why I didn't use pillar weapons. Well, it's because I decided. Now, of course, Melee will also place last against Empress of Light with this build. It never stood a chance against classes like Summoner, who I found to be strongest with the Electric Eel and Xenostaff, clocking in at 47 seconds. Mage reaches ever so slightly closer to first by claiming second with 74 seconds, and Ranger sits at third with 86 seconds and a single death that'll give Melee a meaningless bonus point. Mage's wiki build has a nearly as strong showing against Duke Fishron, but without the Boulder Staff, Heat Ray, or Razor Pine for some high-impact DPS in the third phase, it slows down considerably in that phase, completing the battle in just under 2 minutes. Melee finds itself in third place with its 81 seconds, Ranger took 93 seconds, but was also stuck with using the Nail Gun, which isn't a bad weapon, but not the fastest against Duke. And Summoner, even without Daytime Empress gear, keeps its throne with a 30-second into victory. Though I had to redo the testing, ignore the footage. Summoner can practically taste the gold medal, and it is in the part of the game where it's its strongest. Ranger is in the lead, but with Summoner close on its heels, and it'll continue to close the distance against Empress, where the wiki build for Summoner clears her in 68 seconds. I even tried the new vulgar display of flowers, thinking maybe it's got some hidden potential, but it didn't do as well as the Morningstar. Oh, and I guess I should also make clear that I'm also using the pre-Golem wiki recommendations. Anyways, Mage managed to swipe second at 1 minute and 47, the Spectre Staff being much more useful against this boss. Melee was slow, but not the slowest at 2 minutes and 28 seconds, and Ranger comes in the rear with nearly a 3-minute time. That fumble will make it so Ranger is much more susceptible to being passed by Summoner and Mage as we head on to the path of least resistance builds, which isn't going to be good for Ranger. Here we end up with the tightest competition we've seen this entire video. So tight, I had to do extra battles to make sure everything was accounted for. Barely finding itself in last place once more, Melee finishes at 2 minutes and 12 seconds. Pulling up behind him is Mage with 2 minutes and 6 seconds, and Ranger barely beats Mage with 2 minutes and 5 seconds, which means Summoner wins out with barely under 2 minutes and claims an even closer position to first place. Although 1 bonus point will be given to Ranger for having the fastest overall time at 1 minute and 55 seconds. Feeling victory slip through its fingers, Mage takes first place against Empress with these same builds at 1 minute 58 seconds. Summoner maintains a strong standing at 2 minutes and 5 seconds with 1 failure, and Melee beats Ranger with just under 3 minutes, while Ranger took 3 minutes 13 seconds with 2 failures. Melee gets a bonus point for not dying for what it's worth. Ranger is barely holding on to its lead, but it's not out of the woods yet. The survey builds are likely to favor the Summoner heavily. Ranger is sliding farther and farther, only having the Shotbow and Venus Magnum for this battle, keeping it in last place with 3 minutes and 43 seconds. Even with Turtle Armor, Melee is a whole minute faster than that pitiful performance, and Mage only slows slightly with the absence of its support weapons at 2 minutes and 13 seconds, which means Summoner claims the crown at 1 minute 40, helping cement its position. But Mage manages to actually take the throne from Ranger, which it will do again as the standings remain exactly the same against Empress Alite. Ranger is last with almost 5 whole minutes. Melee not much more impressive than that. Mage shaves off a lot of time compared to those two with 2 minutes and 31 seconds, and Summoner wins it again at 1 minute 29. All of them died once except Melee. Speaking of Melee, he's not about to go down without a fight, where its wiki build with lots of melee speed and the Flying Dragon clears the Cultist the fastest when you stick to the boss like glue, completing the battle in 21 seconds while still tanking the hits pretty well. With the Daytime Empress gear, Summoner clearly is going to be one of the top dogs, completing the battle in 30 seconds. Ranger sees some success with Aerial Bane, claiming third place at 37 seconds, while Mage sees its ability to win slip through its fingers with this massive failure, finishing in 43 seconds, despite my best attempts. These are the updated scores, and also there is no theoretical max build for these last 2 bosses because, well, there aren't really sequence breaks anymore. Against Moonlord, these same builds are upgraded with pillar weapons, and you guessed it, Summoner placed first with 2 deaths. Ranger more than a minute slower at 2 minutes and 3 seconds, but also with 2 failures, and Melee is third at 2:12, with Mage in the back of the pack with 2 minutes and 28 seconds, but at least not suffering a single loss to get a bonus point. Summoner is now tied for second place against Cultist with the path of least resistance, but Melee is not willing to give it up because after multiple tests with both setups, they end up with a tie at barely under a minute. They'll have to split the 3 points, allowing Mage to continue to hold on to its lead against Summoner and Ranger. That gives Ranger the ability to stick in there with a point. Least resistance builds against Moonlord leave no room to question Summoner's dominance. The only issue is that we're not allowing Fish on Wings or a Flying Mount, and I haven't fought Moonlord with those limitations in a very long time. Summoner claims first, but with 2 deaths to its name. Only that few deaths because it kills Moonlord fast enough that dodging isn't as much of an issue. Mage will take second place with nearly double Summoner's speed, and Ranger beats out Melee for third, but with a whopping 4 failures to its name. Melee will earn a bonus point for only dying once compared to Ranger's 4, and Mage will get 1 for not dying as much as Summoner. Now for our final builds against Cultist and Moonlord with Summoner, Mage, and with it being anybody's game between Summoner, Ranger, and Mage. But I think we all know where it's going to go, with Summoner already having done so well in the other 2 categories against these bosses, and this time having access to the Kaleidoscope and Xenostaff, interestingly enough. Ranger then takes down Mage at 72 seconds compared to Mage's 87 seconds with a Razor Blade Typhoon and Razor Pine. Strong weapons, but not the fastest at killing Cultist. Mage and Ranger are neck and neck, but for Ranger to take silver, it needs Mage to place last and itself first, which is not at all what happened with the survey builds, where Summoner for the first time ever is blessed with a mount, and because of this, I ignored the more votes for accessories that were movement related. It didn't add much in the way of damage accessories, but it still cleared in a very impressive 70 seconds. Mage will solidify its second place positioning by being second once again, way back at 2 minutes and 56 seconds. Ranger barely beats Melee at 3 minutes and 27 seconds, but also failed twice, giving Melee's time at 3 minutes and 38 seconds a bonus point. And with that, we have our answer. The best class in all of Terraria is in fact the Summoner class. Oh, that feels disgusting to say. I almost gagged while saying that. This is the last thing we needed. Another video giving Summoner simps a reason to screech about how their class is the best class. Mage is second and not far behind. That's the real takeaway here. All of you who think Mage is the worst, but that's actually where I should start talking about all the problems with this video. I'm sure there are already plenty of comments pointing things out, so let's see how well I address them. For one, Mage had access to not only mana regen, but also mana power potions the entire time. This is fair enough when using the theoretical max, but with all of the other categories, it's perhaps unfair to have tested the class while basically removing the one thing that often holds it back. Particularly for the Path of Least Resistance builds, I should have never used these potions, and that was the intention at the start, but then I forgot to unbuff myself a few times early on for various builds, so decided it'd just be easier to keep using the simple buffs for all the classes. In my head, the 2 mana potions are very simple to make, but magic power requires Deathweed, which can be very annoying to obtain consistently. It's also questionable if these potions should have been used for the survey builds as well, which segues, well, nicely into the issues with that. The survey was extremely long, and I couldn't include every possible option on it, or else nobody would have ever filled it out. Only about 500 people did respond to it, and that's a fine number, but on average, it likely took 30 minutes for people to actually complete the thing, while I made many oversimplifications to shorten the thing. For instance, potions. They were split up into offensive and defensive potions, and then split again as either fishing or non-fishing potions. So there's like offensive potions and then fishing offensive potions. There's defensive potions and then fishing defensive potions. This meant that both of Mage's offensive potions were grouped together, and as long as 50% of people voted for them, then Mage got both. If the mana regen and the mana power potions were separated, it's possible that fewer people would have voted for the mana power potions at the very least. A similar oversimplification impacted Ranger when, in hard mode, I separated ammo by either the basic wooden arrow or musket ball, or literally any upgraded version of the two. From there, I had to make a judgment call as to which arrow or bullet was the best, rather than what I think most people actually use. This may have actually benefited Ranger in the survey category more than it deserved. Also for the survey, again, in an effort to slim it down, I only listed accessories and weapons that I thought were the most used, with a few more for other strategies that I know of, but that doesn't mean I didn't miss a few things along the way. Like, I know the Star Veil, for instance, was actually one accessory I didn't include on it that many people pointed out should have been. Even though people had the option to write in different options, the fact that these were missing from the survey was enough of a hurdle to prevent most people from remembering to even vote for it. So, all that said, the survey was meant to be a sort of baseline for what the community typically uses, but as we saw with the Summoner against Mechs, varying strategies could conflict and mess with the results, and the need to simplify it may have resulted in certain weapons or accessories being skipped or used when they shouldn't have been. It also didn't allow me to stack multiple accessories of the same family, like say every celestial magnet combination, because all I knew was that people used one of the accessories on that tree with no idea how many in that tree they might be using. For theoretical max builds, I think I did a good job maximizing damage, but without reforges or meta strategies like a lance with a minecart, there are definitely going to be examples where certain classes could have really shaken up the results had they been allowed to use them. Not to mention, there is no guarantee that I played all the builds the most optimally, including during times that the times were very close. Perhaps a different person with the same builds could do it much faster, or even maybe they would die more often. And that's not even mentioning that I might have not been maxing the build out as well as it could have, such as I use the Stinger Necklace sometimes rather than something like the Moon Charm. I have no idea which one is best, but I haven't used the charms in such a long time that they didn't even cross my mind to try. Ranger managed to earn most of its points from the wiki and max builds because we allowed Star Cannon and Platinum coins with the coin gun. Both of these deal ridiculously high damage, but require either ages of farming or glitches to really take advantage of, which is fair enough for the max builds, but I also used it for the wiki builds, which for the wiki builds, I did want to max out whatever the recommended wiki weapons were, but of course the wiki is recommending these weapons knowing that they deal the highest damage, but also assuming that the player understands they likely won't be able to take advantage of it due to a lack of ammunition. There's also an issue just with the size and scope of this testing. This whole project has taken me over like 60 hours to complete, and yet for even more accurate results, I could have easily added another 40 or more hours. Perhaps the biggest issue with this whole video and my methodology was that the scope was just too big to make the whole thing manageable. I'm sure there are even more errors that I made along the way, and I invite you to point those out. I have tried to find the conclusive results for myself, but maybe by making such a bold claim, people with even more knowledge of how to maximize these classes will share how to make them even stronger than I showed, and I'll try my best to keep those updated in a pinned comment at the top of this video. But with what I showed, what can we learn? Well, for one, Ranger is basically Batman. If you give him endless prep time, he's going to win most of the time. We also find that Ranger tends to struggle the most post-mech. It does have some decent options, but its DPS really takes a nosedive at that point in the game. Melee was never going to win this thing, but it's actually impressive how many points it did manage to claim with the aforementioned lances. Perhaps it could have closed the gap even more, but the class just wasn't made to kill things fast. It was always meant to be the one that is hardest to kill. Even so, there were times that it was quite the strong competitor for damage. Mage, we find, is in fact good, but heavily reliant on potions to reach its full potential. I have shown methods of making mana regen less of a factor, but that can come at the cost of more damage-focused accessories, and in early game, it's not really fair to expect those potions to be used at all. I still think it's really strong, and strangely, it was second place in a lot of the boss battles in a lot of categories, making it almost the best class in many situations while chugging potions. Summoner, we learn, is incredibly strong, but only really shines once you get into hard mode. In pre-hard mode, it's often fine, but pre-hard mode I think is where the summoner suffers the most from the removal of whip stacking. The new whips, although fleshing out the class more, didn't make the class stronger, which isn't necessarily what they should have been going for. I like what they have done with it, but it does mean summoner is now a little bit slower than it probably would have been in the previous update. And with that, if you haven't already, subscribe and share your thoughts down below. I understand this video opens me and my methods up to tons of scrutiny, and that's fair. This isn't something I do regularly. There's probably plenty of mistakes that I make, but that's just how it is, and I had some fun while doing it and learned a few things too. Hopefully you did as well. I'm sure if you're a summoner main, you're happy to have won, but not happy that you didn't win by more, you greedy little boogers. If you're a melee lover, you feel next to nothing because you never expected to win in the first place. Mage lovers will be largely unaffected, but feel a small sense of pride in second place, all the while knowing that they have a serious potion addiction, and Ranger mains will continue to shout to the world that they are the best class from the little shacks in the woods they live in with nobody around to hear them, and remain convinced that they are in fact the only person who likes Ranger the most. Thank you, have a good day, and check out this video.